institution. It doesn't mean anything that today we live in a mental institution. 'Cause everything's crazy. They're doing away with borders. It's a new world. It's a new day. There is a new world order coming to your town. You better get ready. You better get ready. It's a new day. It's a new way. It's a new day.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Samsel Report right here on Revolution Radio. I'm coming to you live from beautiful Clearwater, Florida. Oh, yes, the phone line is up. The number to call in 727 474 1086. Because I want to hear from you. And because you might have some questions for our guest tonight. So, there you go. Did you write that down? 727 474 1086. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, our government is a cesspool of corruption. Our industrial might is a thing of the past, and the Constitution and Bill of Rights are being trashed by a treasonous, out-of-control government intent on enslaving the American people. I know, it sounds just like something from out of the Twilight Zone, but do you know what, ladies and gentlemen? Do you know what? We live in the Twilight Zone. That's right. Now, it's time for an important message, especially for you listeners out there. Because this program on Revolution Radio is listener supported. And that means you, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if you like this program and you like this network, then please send us money. Now, we don't want a whole lot of money. All we want is whatever you can spare. So please help fund this broadcasting network because, ladies and gentlemen, you need this broadcasting network. Revolution Radio is the voice of truth and freedom that you won't find anywhere else. Okay? All right? Okay? All right then. Let's get this here show on the road. We all know that when the media or the government desires to cover something up, they'll often deflect allegations by labeling them conspiracy theories. Likewise, they discredit and insult people by labeling them conspiracy theorists. Now, when I was 10 years old, John F. Kennedy was gunned down in Dallas. Now, to this day, I simply do not believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin. I think he was a patsy, and I think he was being played. In truth, I think the Kennedy assassination was an inside job. Holy Alex Jones. Boy, oh boy, I'm a conspiracy theorist. But hold on, because consider this. If Oswald didn't do it, that means that the real guilty parties could still be running around out there. And that means they got away with it. Just like they get away with everything else. All the time. Until now. So, I am honored to have on this show tonight someone who knew Lee Oswald. Someone who was close to him and knew a very different Oswald than the media has described. And my special guest tonight is Judyth Baker. author of Lee and Me, and she is. Are you there, Judyth?
Hello.
There you are. Hi, how are you doing, Judyth?
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, you know, uh, I like I just got finished saying, I never did believe that Lee Harvey Oswald single-handedly killed President Kennedy. And on my show tonight, I think what we would do is look at a whole different Lee Harvey Oswald than has been presented to us by the mainstream media all these years.
Yes, for 16 years I've been showing how Lee was framed. But this year, when I spoke at the Oswald conference a few days ago, I talked about the real Lee that I knew. And I saw tears in people's eyes.
Mhm.
Because and you know what this young man did? He had barely turned 24. He truly had accomplished more in those few short years than what many people do in a lifetime. And by the way, William,
Yes.
I'd like to add that had Lee Oswald not been shot down, think about this. He
Right.
would have gone to trial. The United States government would have been anxious to preserve him, to present him as a showpiece, and someone they caught, someone that they could bring to trial and prove that Lee had killed Kennedy. Instead, he was gunned down within 47 hours of his arrest, which means he did not survive the weekend, which means the government did it.
Well, that's what I'd like to delve into tonight.
Let's do.
Let us get into that, because this man needs to be vindicated. Then.
Well, I know I said a radical statement there, but I think I can elaborate and perhaps convince our listeners.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Well, we could start with a young man who, at age 12 and a half, was described by the Warren Commission. By the way, he's supposed to be very stupid, like leaving a rifle where he could find it, like shooting Tippit and then not throwing the gun away, but keeping it with him and all the way to the Texas Theater, where they could then match it to bullets, by the way, which weren't the originals that were discarded at the Tippit scene.
Mm-hmm.
This was an intelligent young man. When he was 12 and a half or so, he was delving into the dusty back shelves of libraries, as he put it.
Mm-hmm.
And according to the Warren Commission, he was already interested in communism, and he was reading Marx and Engels and Lenin. Have you read Marx, Engels, and Lenin?
Who, me? No.
Yes. Well, here we have a 12-and-a-half-year-old boy who's supposed to be really stupid, doesn't even throw away a gun. And they'd say that he is already interested in Marx and Lenin and Engels. By the way, they do not mention that this boy is also reading Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin,
Mm-hmm.
Leviathan by Hobbes.
Right. So in other words, he's pretty politically aware.
Yes, he was. He had dyslexia. He had come from New Orleans and was wearing blue jeans when they all wore trousers up there and white socks. And he did, well, actually black socks at the time. But the point is that he was not accepted very easily. And he quickly erased his accent and realized that if you don't have an accent, you can't be pinned down to any one spot. That made him really, really good. And later in life, people were saying, oh, he couldn't have come from New Orleans. But we do hear a slip here and there. I have the equivalent of a doctorate in linguistics and many graduate courses in that area. Many, I say several. And you'll hear him saying when he's arrested and they're interrogating him and the reporters are, and he used the word ax instead of ask. So you can get those little tiny hints that he was from New Orleans.
Okay.
Now, to give you an idea of how close we were in a way, and on that same principle, when we almost missed, Susie Hanover, my landlady, and I almost missed his short debut on TV. And Lee said, I want to make sure you don't miss my what I have to say on radio.
Uh-huh.
And when I first came to New Orleans, I pronounced it New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what he did twice in the radio program is he pronounced it New Orleans. Yeah. So, well, it has it's a two-edged sword, because then people were saying, oh, he wasn't really from New Orleans. It must be somebody else, taking his place, and so on. No, he did that to make sure that I listened. He said, did you hear anything interesting? I said, yes. I heard New Orleans instead of New Orleans. So you see, that's what he did. So we, he cared about whether I was listening or not, because we were in love.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned so much from this young man. I learned what true courage was.
Mm-hmm.
In my book, Me and Lee, for example, I'll tell you a good example. We were walking toward Clay Shaw's house with several people, and they were started telling dirty jokes and everything like that. And Lee said, look, they've been drinking. We had been with them. I was pretending to be a bimbo at the club where we were just prior to that. Lee was always quiet and listening. When you're quiet and listening, they think you're stupid, or they think you're not listening, you see, because you're not making any responses. As for me, I was acting like, oh boy, who am I? I'm just here just because I'm cute, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was the only girl. And well, anyway, he said, I don't want you going in there into Clay Shaw's at 1313 Dauphine, because they were starting to make jokes that were pretty obscene and everything. So we went on walking further. We went to other parts in the French Quarter. We had chocolate Cokes that night.
Uh-huh.
Walked back toward Carlos Marcello's car. We actually had a chance to ride in the car. And part of my bimbo act is I said, oh boy, I get to put my little rear end on the upholstery where the Godfather sits, Well, the fact is, he said, you silly little girl, because I had to sit in his lap. There wasn't room for me to sit anywhere else. And all the other guys said, oh, gee, I think that he enjoyed that. Well, anyway, so we're walking back, and a sailor steps out.
Okay.
With a gun. With a knife, excuse me.
Mm.
And we had no gun. We didn't have any way to protect ourselves. So
Right.
I thought, and he said, girlie, hand over your purse. And Lee said, you don't want her purse, in a way like that. And then he said, I want your wallet, to Lee. Lee reached in his back pocket,
Right.
pulled out the wallet. Underneath the wallet, he had a switchblade.
Uh-huh.
Out it came like that. And that sailor, you could see the blood pumping through his veins.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I'm going to cut your face. You don't have this over. And Lee said, not before I get your balls. Because he's shorter, see, a lot shorter.
Right.
So the man turned and ran. We got in the car, and we were sitting there, and all of a sudden I noticed that Lee was shaking.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I said, what? Oh, I see how you're shaking. He said, it's all right, it will pass. He said, I was afraid. But he said, you have to do actions anyway, whether you're afraid or not.
Right. So how did you come to meet Lee?
Everybody asked that question.
Yeah.
I was in cancer research, and I had been trained in world-class situations, how to handle the SB40 monkey virus, for example. I could handle, under primitive conditions, I actually induced cancer, lung cancer, in germ-free mice using an aerosol that had cigarette products in it in only 7 days. And I crashed a seminar to show my work to the best doctors there were, because they were in St. Petersburg, Florida. I was in Bradenton. Now, when I was 16, I invented a new way to get magnesium out of seawater, and some of them already knew me because of the International Science Fair. I'd met Werner von Braun and all those people before.
Okay.
So briefly, Dr. Harold Deal was there. He was the vice president of the American Cancer Society for Research. His good friend was Dr. Alt Oxner, and another good friend they had was Dr. George Moore. All three of them were crusading against cigarette smoking, and here I had shown that you could give lung cancer to germ-free mice in only 7 days with cigarette products. And they were going to kick me out. I mean, I had slipped between two I'm short, and between two tall reporters that were going in, the doors closed and they turned down the lights, but I had nowhere to sit. And here come the police. They were going to kick me out of this symposium. I didn't belong. I was the only girl there, everybody else in white coats and suits and looking stern. And here I am. And here they were coming. They were going to take me out. But Dr. Deal, he looked, and Sir Robert Robinson was sitting next to him. We became friends. He was a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry. And Dr. Harold Urey was there, and they all three of them said, basically with Dr. Deal, wait a minute, who is this girl and how come she's here? So they actually had me sit beside them, right. And they continued with the program, and then at lunchtime I began showing them what I had. It was hard for them to believe. Well, when they visited my school, they shut down the lab. It was so dangerous what I was doing.
Oh.
So from there on, I went on to Roswell Park Institute. At that time, I learned how to help formulate the best formula there was on the planet to grow cancer more rapidly. And in the newspaper articles, there were a lot of them about me, because I was, 17 when I did that with the mice, and 18 now. And the formula was the RPMI 1640. It's famous today. It's still being used as probably the premier and most important formula for growing cancer cells on the planet. And here I had a good handle on how to make that formula. It wasn't perfect yet in 1961, but I had the information I used in 62. By 1963, I've been invited to New Orleans. I'm supposed to work with Dr. Mary Sherman. She was the head of the bone lab and a wonderful oncologist, famous for her work in cancer. And I was going to work under her. I accepted. They were going to give me opportunity to enter medical school 2 years in advance. Why shouldn't I go? There are long stories about how my parents didn't want me to do those kind of things. I was estranged from them. I was kind of seduced by a very good-looking, very tall young man who was a genius in mathematics, and of course I was interested in all that. IQ of 186. It turned out that the great silences that he had, that I thought were full of depth, were really full of emptiness. Yeah, but at the time I couldn't find a compatible companion, and he was interested, and my hormones ran away with me, and when I didn't want him to know that I was going to New Orleans and might not I was never going to return at that time to the University of Florida. Okay. But I told him I probably wasn't going to. When he said, well, I'm going to come marry you. It's a long story. I'm shutting it, compressing it right now for you. But right. The point is that I got to the university and New Orleans and Tulane and all that, and looked around, and my doctors were not there. I'd gotten there 2 weeks early because we were on the semester system there in New Orleans, all the schools there. But I came from the University of Florida, which had a trimester system. It was a new system, and my doctors were out of town, and I was alone. Now, that's not good for a 19-year-old who is kind of naive about the world.
Right.
And instead of getting a steak dinner and being wined and dined and oh, look, here's our young girl, and we're going to put... Instead, I was forced to move in with 2 strippers and a Playboy bunny and a waitress, and they showed me the seedy side of town in no time. Yeah, so I was an asset, and I now realize, I didn't at the time, it looks like a young, good-looking ex-Marine was sent to help keep an eye on me that I wouldn't get lost. I mean, I was an asset. Mm-hmm. And because I came early and I knew all sorts of things, it's in the book, Me and Lee. Right. It's all coincidental. Like I was going to, my fiance was Robert A. Baker, and his parents were working at that time at Eglin Air Force Base, so I was sending off a letter to Eglin Air Force Base at the time that Lee intervened here. Okay. And Lee knew secret special agent at FBI agent Robert A. Baker, who was at Eglin Air Force Base, so we thought I was writing to him. On top of that, he knew a CIA pilot, an asset, whose name was Alexander Rourke. In fact, he'd recently met him. And Rourke had been in New Orleans recently, and here I was sending a letter to Robert A. Baker in Eglin Air Force Base, and it looked like it was from A. Rourke. It was an R, really. It was a cursive R, capital, looked like an A to Lee at the time. So this Raleigh Rourke, Robert had me write, pretending to be him, so his parents wouldn't know we were going to elope, because his parents didn't like Catholics.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I was pretending to be him, and he said, "Don't put perfume on the letter. That's going to make it really look weird, coming from a guy and has perfume on it. I don't want to think I'm running around with the wrong kind of people."
Right.
I mean, that's the way you thought in the 60s.
Okay.
So here I am handing over a letter because I had gone to the post office, and there's more. Remember, I had been trained, got special training. I'd also been trained to translate Russian technical material about cancer.
Okay.
The Russians, they felt, were ahead of us. Not that I was that good, but technical papers really are mainly in just a simple past and
Right.
Present tense, and it's easier to read than like poetry or something like that.
Okay.
So I had studied Russian, and I knew some Russian, and I used to, if I saw anybody new, I would use Russian or Spanish or something and say something as an icebreaker. Well, this young man standing behind me, Robert, had not written. I was angry. I was only allowed to write one letter to him.
Mm-hmm.
I had under my arm, I was carrying around a newspaper for several days, and on it had a code, and the code said Jario, and it said, "Pretty here, please write," that kind of thing.
Okay.
Because he didn't want he was afraid to call long distance. His parents might notice, "Why are you calling New Orleans?" So he had me put that in the paper. Well, I didn't know that this code name Jario, Lee Oswald, who had been trained by the ONI and had gone to the USSR and knew all kinds of codes, it looked to him like a CIA code.
Okay.
And since I had this R.A. Baker going and this Rourke thing going, and now as I dropped this newspaper, rolled up newspaper, as I handed this one letter over to the postman,
Right.
he picks this up and sees it circled, and I've kissed it, and it says Jario. It's very which means IMJA. That's what I was doing originally.
Okay.
To Robert R.O. See, Jari. Anyway, but he didn't know that. All he knew is that it looked like a code in the personals there. And then as he picked it up, I thought, well, he's kind of nice looking. He's a nice, clean-cut guy, and he stands so straight. He has this military bearing.
Right.
So he picks it up, and I said, "Karasha, Tavarish." I mean, well done, comrade. And I thought he would say in return, "It's not," I thought he'd say, "What did you say?" Instead, he said, "It's not wise to speak Russian in New Orleans." In Russian. I couldn't believe it. Well, he couldn't believe it. I could speak Russian. I'm a girl. I mean,
Uh-huh.
It was a shock to him. And furthermore, I looked at his hand, and he didn't have a wedding ring on.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, gee, I'm not married yet. And I'm mad at Robert. He hasn't written to me. He said, write every day. He says he loves me, and he doesn't even write.
Right.
Yeah. So we start walking together, and then I see that he has a wedding ring on his right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Just like my grandma. My grandmother was born in Hungary. And the Hungarians and others often wore their wedding rings on their right hand. So did Lee, because he'd been married in Russia. Then I realized he's married right away. Lee told me about his wife and that he wasn't getting along with her. She still wasn't there. And, he had come ahead to New Orleans. Before long, here's what happened. David Ferry, who was homosexual, had asked for help on the secret side of an important project to kill Fidel Castro. Okay. That Dr. Oxner, who had invited me to work with Dr. Mary Sherman, she was on it too. And she was also directing this lab where I was going to work, and I would have been on the side that was open and not a secret. It would be named something else. That's the way they did it, Right. Instead, I'd come early. Here, David Ferry was going to be going a lot to Miami. He didn't have as much time as he'd hoped to work on some of this. He needed an assistant. They thought it was me. They thought they didn't send a man because he was a young person, male, because he might seduce him. Yeah, so they sent the girl, see. So I seemed to fit all the parameters. My doctors were out of town, and Dr. Sherman was even out of town. And here after all, he talks about Dr. Sherman. I said, well, that's who I'm going to be working with. And so right away, I was introduced to Dr. David Ferry. Yes, his name was in the directory as Dr. Ferry, as a psychologist with a doctorate degree,
Okay.
who for some reason was interested in cancer research. Well, his mother had died of cancer. He had been working, that's how he got interested in it. You'll see in my book, David Ferry, the whole story, the true story about David Ferry.
Uh-huh.
So this is how it began, and it's a long, long story, but maybe you'll see that because of other things I had said, that, for example, I told Lee that I had dated, which is true, the son of the finance minister of Castro's Cuba. His name was Tony Lopez Fresquet. I knew all these anti-Castro people in Gainesville, Florida. They were my friends because I'd gotten interested through Tony.
Okay.
And so it looked like I was on the anti-Castro project, you see. And that was the one that had been sent to help David Ferry. That's how it all began. And by the time the doctors came back, it was too late to put me on the other side. I knew too much.
Uh-huh.
And since I had lived in Florida, my friend, and you're in Florida right now.
Right.
Imagine watching, in fact, they did. I think they came through that area. But imagine the tanks rumbling by just 6 months earlier. And they're all going down to the Keys, and they're going to be aiming their everything they've got at Cuba, because Castro is aiming nuclear warheads at your mom, your dad, your family, yourself.
Yeah,
You're in Florida. That's where I came from. Mm-hmm. So anyone that says, oh, you awful woman, you want to go and kill somebody. I mean, he wanted to kill us. And so it was easy to persuade me to participate in this. Okay. I was young and I was impressible. And also, of course, all my authoritative figures, Dr. Oxner and everybody I knew, they were all hawks, militants,
Hawks, yeah.
Yeah, so that's how that began.
Oh, that's interesting. It's now. What about Lee? Was he working for the CIA?
Okay, imagine when I'm talking to him and he's telling me he's studying Spanish, that he's going to go to Cuba, because he was originally set to go to Cuba. And I said, well, why? And he said, well, you think I'm going to go there to give Castro a medal? I mean, he had a really good sense of humor. But he was self-deprecating in a way. For example, he finally told me that, yes, he'd come back from the USSR with his Russian wife and baby, and that he got his wife pregnant again, so that even when they divorced, because he wanted to divorce her, that the baby born in the United States would mean that she would not get deported, you see.
Right.
So this was not a marriage made in heaven. Originally, they married, not that he was not attracted to her, but come on. They decided to get married after knowing each other only 6 weeks, and almost 2 weeks at that time. He was in a hospital in the bed. They didn't really go on dates. She saw him as a ticket to the USA, and he saw her as a way so he wouldn't get deported if he stayed any longer in the USSR. Uh-huh. But when she had a baby, he wanted that baby out. So that was his goal. I mean, he loved his children. And the last thing he ever wanted was for them to have to live in the USSR under those conditions.
Right.
So that's the background there. He was trained by the ONI, and here's something peculiar. I've often been asked, well, wasn't he maybe mind controlled? Maybe he was turned to kill Kennedy, for example, because he was hypnotized like Sirhan or something. Well, first of all, you'll read in Me and Lee how Lee had actually been trained and was selected to resist interrogations and to resist brainwashing. In fact, even when he had been captured and betrayed the way he was, those people who interrogated him, he said, well, I'm used to hard interrogations and soft interrogations. Now, who was doing that to him? Well, that he had been trained to resist everything. And he was trained at Atsugi. He knew about the MK Ultra training camps that they had there.
Yeah.
He was one of those who could resist hypnosis and everything. And indeed he could. And he had a strong will. They even said, the police said they couldn't break him. And I'm telling you, they did some awful things to him that people don't realize what they did when they put newspapers over the window there in it's a room where they would take people for it was investigation room. But windows, they put newspaper there so you couldn't see what they were doing to him anymore. And we have a gentleman, his name was Vincent Drain. He's an FBI agent. He was asked after Lee was murdered to check to see, investigate whether or not he'd been physically abused.
Right.
And when he was supposed to give his report, instead he said no comment.
Uh-huh.
Now that's not what you say.
And this is between the time that they picked him up at the movie theater, and the time that when Ruby got him, they tortured him.
Well, you can look at the bottom of his feet. You'll see 3 marks on one of his feet there. It's what they would use on for cattle prod.
Mm-hmm.
It's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
There are other marks that you have to watch out. Not some cuts that were cut downs that they did to try and get blood into him.
Okay.
But there are other signs of what happened to him. He wasn't a man to complain, though. This is he was in control. In fact, they said they could not get him to confess.
Self at all times, yeah.
Yeah. Imagine, he's so young. They surround him with the tallest people to make him look short. He was actually at 5'9". He was actually the average height of any young man at that time, or any man at that time in the United States. You can go look up the statistics. But they always hear him, described as some little thing, a little scrawny thing. He wasn't. I mean, this young man, when he was only 17, went through boot camp as a Marine. Think about it.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
So, I mean, this is a tenacious, patriotic young man. Why do you think he would join? A few days after he was turned 17, he joined the Marines. Now, the Wikipedia, which please do not trust Wikipedia's version of Lee Oswald's life.
Uh-huh.
I tried to change something in there. I'll tell you what happened. They said, well, let's forget about how many investigations they say showed that Lee Oswald killed Kennedy, because those investigations were only based on one investigation, the FBI's.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they used for everything else. And of course, Hoover was very interested in making sure that Lee Oswald would be charged. In fact, on November 22nd, the day that Kennedy was shot, that same day, Hoover wrote a reply to an inquiry from the SAC there, that special agent in command there in Dallas, who said, well, what about, I'm going to paraphrase, you've got wanted for treason posters out there, you've got an ad that was put in the paper with black around it, it was a funeral, against Kennedy and all the evil that he'd done according to them. And they said, well, should we look at them? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
And Hoover wrote, no, we have our man. He said, we already have him.
I see.
Same day that Lee was arrested, and that's the same day he said that. They never, before any evidence reached Washington, D.C., like the rifle and everything else.
Right.
So there we go with the FBI, the CIA also. Now, Lee had been borrowed by the CIA, he told me. He had been trained by the Office of Naval Intelligence. Remember, when Lee Oswald came back, unlike Mr. Webster, he brought his wife back and his daughter, the baby daughter, on a loan from the State Department. And in fine print, it says, can only be given to a citizen in good standing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you think, when you hear that Lee Oswald, as it says in Wikipedia, renounced his citizenship,
Yeah, that's what they said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. He said it. He did say it, but he never signed a thing. He knew he was being bugged. They were up there on the 5th floor of the embassy, and it was filled with bugs, and they were actually sending microwaves over there, too, to discomfort them. So he says out loud, I am going to renounce my citizenship. I'm going to do this and that. I'm going to tell secrets that I learned about the U-2.
Right.
He throws his passport down and let him walk out. Now, I've used this on other interviews, but it's important to stress it again. Today, if you put someone say someone came to the embassy there in Iraq, and they say, I'm going to Iran, and I'm going to tell them all about, because I know all about the drone system, how they can shoot drones down.
Right.
And I'm renouncing my citizenship, and I'm leaving this building, and I'm going to them. Do you think they'd let him out of the building?
No. No.
Well, how come they let Lee Oswald out? All right, so they did. He was there 30 months. He comes back, picks up his passport, which is waiting for him, gets a State Department loan, takes his wife, a Russian woman, out. Robert Webster couldn't do that. He had to leave his girlfriend and baby behind. I mean, you don't have that going on unless, so this young man, his dream was to become a spy. He loved Herbert Philbrick's example. Herbert Philbrick wrote I Led Three Lives, and it was on TV. Lee saw it when he was 12 and a half, going on 13. He saw at least 6 or 7 episodes there before they returned to New Orleans. By the way, Lee was in awful trouble when he returned. He had played so much hooky up there. But I don't want to digress too much. Remember, I told you what Wikipedia said.
Right.
That he joined the Marines, that this young man joined the Marines. Well, first of all, they said when he turned 17, he dropped out of school. That's the way they put it. And then they put a whole bunch of other things. And finally, they say he joined the Marines. You can't tell that he dropped out of school to join the Marines from the way Wikipedia has it. So I and a friend of mine, Alan, we wrote a sentence. We put it in there right after joining the Marines, and we put there that he received his GED in the Marines. In 3 minutes, sir, 3 minutes, it was erased. Okay. And then they took, it wasn't much longer after that, they took my biography that they had in Wikipedia. It had been there 5 years because I was a well-known artist, and I'm a writer, and of course they did my story on the History Channel. They removed it. And can you imagine? They removed my biography that had been there for 5 years for placing a sentence. Of course, they didn't say that was the reason. First, they said I didn't exist. Second, they said I was a one-note pony. Right. All I had done is claim that I was his girlfriend. Let's forget I did other things. And by the way, my 4th book will be coming out in the spring. But and my paintings, this is how I raise money for charity and for conferences. I do not keep the money for myself. But I do think my paintings they sell for something. They don't sell for $50. They sell for $5,000 because I'm losing my vision, and I can only paint a few a year. But they're they're full of detail, and each one is specifically.
What happened? Hello. Let me see what's going on here. Okay, we are experiencing Skype problems, so we've lost Judyth. We've lost Judyth Baker, and we've lost the. Oh well, how do you like them apples? Boy, oh boy. We're trying to get back with Judyth. Hello, Judyth. Well, anyway, so there you have it. I hate when this happens. It's just terrible when this happens. Skype. Okay. All right. They dropped the call. Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Samsel Report, and right here on Revolution Radio. And let me make a plea for the network here. We are listener supported, and we do need to be able to support ourselves, and ladies and gentlemen. And here we go. We lost Judyth, but we're going to get her back here. But yeah, so send us some money if you would. That would be really nice. Oh, man. I tell you. Hello. I don't even know if this thing is working. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so there's Judyth.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, that often happens.
Yes, with Skype, it does happen quite often. So, where were we, Judyth?
Okay, basically, I was carrying on. And really, people need to ask questions, I think, and that's what I really like to do because it's a lot of this I've said before. We were involved in a plan to try to kill Castro. I was an expert in handling some of these very bad cancer viruses and so on. I knew how to do it under primitive conditions, and I was used. And I have to say that when I objected to testing these on prisoners who weren't ill, they told me originally that they had terminal diseases.
Uh-huh.
When I objected, I was kicked out of the program. It probably saved my life because I was Judy Very. Actually, I was Jay Very with David Ferry. And a lot of people, when they heard the J, they probably thought, that's a guy's name, because it's just Jay. He called me Jay. And Ferry, if they heard that, they probably thought it was Ferry. Very and Ferry, they probably mixed it up. So I kind of just faded out. And at our cover job, I was Mrs. Baker. And then when I was kicked out and sent to Florida, and they destroyed my career in cancer research, they couldn't just throw me away because, wait a minute, wow. I mean, after all, I was in the newspapers a lot. They knew reporters would come around, so they put me in a prestigious chemical laboratory called Peninsular Chem Research, and right on top of the University of Florida there at Gainesville. What's sad about that is that at the same time they destroyed my records. According to my official records, all I have, even though I invented a new way to get magnesium out of seawater that revolutionized the German method, so you didn't have to use platinum anymore. And Dow Chemical bought my patent rights for $500. They said, take it or we take it anyway. So, I mean, I was just a kid.
Right.
And there wasn't anything I could do about that. Even though all of that happened, according to my official records, which were mutilated, I've only had a common course, the core course in chemistry, and I got a D in it.
Oh, did you?
Oh, yes. It's absurd. And of course, yeah. So they made sure I could never get into science again. And this, basically, I was warned that I couldn't even get my name in the paper. The mafia was watching me. It's a long story. You can read about it in Me and Lee, as I say.
Right.
I have 608 pages. I saved documents. I saved most of these documents because we were in what I thought was historical. And if Castro had been killed by this method, it would have saved the United States being blamed, because if you get cancer, after all, that's a natural cause disease, right?
Right.
Yes, it's not something that the government has been working on.
It's been weaponized.
It has been weaponized. That was 50 years ago. Imagine what they have now.
Oh, yes. If they decided to give you cancer, that would be the end of it right there.
Yeah, just don't go to the same restaurant all the time if you're somebody like me. Because they probably can sprinkle it in your food these days. I mean, we don't know. And I don't want people to think this is about being paranoid. I just ask you to go ahead and look up all the people in Latin and Central America who have been dictators that the U.S. doesn't like, and notice how many of them have cancer or have died of it recently. Right. And it's all the same kind, oral cancers. That is stomach, lip, nose, mouth.
Right.
Stomach, like what happened to Chavez.
Sounds like something that you would ingest, that you would eat or drink.
Even Fidel Castro got stomach cancer.
Wow.
So we have all that going on. And briefly, the opportunities I had, I believe we could have cured cancer.
Oh, probably.
In the late 1960s, early 70s, using bacteriophage is one example.
Right, but
we just don't have it.
That would
that would disrupt the millionaires. That would disrupt the cancer palace industry.
Right, the whole get up, exactly.
Imagine the collapse of using radiation, all those expensive chemotherapeutic agents, the mammograms, which you shouldn't. Women should take thermograms. They're not invasive and they're just as good. You understand that when you have a big industry like that, there is no motivation whatsoever to get rid of it. And David Ferry said something interesting to me. He said, every time they have a law or a program, he says, once you get a program going in the government, it takes so much energy to stop it that they just don't.
Uh-huh. And it just continues on.
Yes. And when you think of every legislator, he wants to make a mark, or she does, and they will introduce new laws, new regulations, but they don't get rid of the old ones.
Well, part of the plan is to depopulate the planet, and through the poisoning of our food, through the poisoning of the air, through the poisoning of the water.
My friend, I live overseas where the water is good, the food is delicious. It is so much cheaper than here. I live in a country where you have free college education, free medical care. And I've often used this example, but George, who had stomach cancer, was treated 6 weeks in the hospital. He was lying there, and he could self-pump himself to get pain relief. Instead, he didn't have to beg with tears in his eyes for somebody to give him a very expensive, drug, after he's reduced to a quivering, begging,
Right.
shadow of himself with no dignity.
Right.
And I asked George how much it costs. Basically, there's like a $200 deductible for the hospital bed, and that's it. And it cost him $1.50 a day, and that was $1.25 a day to rent the TV set.
Wow.
Yeah. And then his mother went in a few years ago, and she was so thin. She was 87 years old, very skinny, and they kept her in for about 6 weeks and got her weight built up. They operated on her. She had it too. I was telling you, their diet wasn't very good. They didn't eat fruits and vegetables. They both got stomach cancer. They were both, exposed to smoking and so on. Well, they operated on this 87-year-old woman, and she was miserable when she got, I'm in pain. But after, a few weeks, she was fine, and she had her birthday, and she saw her great-great-grandchild. She lived 3 more years. In the United States, they would have let her die.
Uh-huh.
Now, when I look at the education system in our country, and I see our inner cities are just, and our...
falling apart, yeah.
Look, do you not understand that you were in Florida, and how long was your electric out when the hurricane hit? Was it out where you lived?
No. Like I said, I'm on the West Coast.
That's right. You're on the West Coast at Clearwater. So you
didn't. Yeah.
But surely you had friends or knew about what happened on the East Coast.
Oh yeah, electric computers, everything.
I think they said 1 million when that. Now you do realize that you have wires hanging overhead.
Oh sure.
In many parts, yeah. You realize some of those wires are like 100 years old.
Oh.
Yes, they are. And in fact, they're not buried. In Europe, in most of the areas, advanced Scandinavian countries I'm talking about, where they have 3 weeks mandated vacation, and almost everybody has 5 weeks of vacation, free medical care, free college education, and they get a year off to take care of their baby when it's born, father and mother.
Oh.
They can spread that over 18 years, too, so that if their child gets sick, they can take off from work without penalty if they want to do that.
Boy.
In our country, the greed and viciousness, and anybody want to keep it the same, just keep voting the same way for the same people, folks.
Exactly.
Because you're going to get it in spades. It's not going to change because they're making way too much money.
Oh,
they're destroying our country.
Exactly, and it doesn't bother them because they think that they're immune to it. That they live in a whole different world than all the rest of us. You know what I'm saying?
Well, it's a matter, as we're going back to feudalism. Excuse my being emotional. I really don't want to be that way because you shouldn't make pleadings on emotion. You should do it, on good sense. The trouble is when the people aren't given information that's correct and they're given lies.
Right.
And there's no penalty for it.
Well, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, I watch the mainstream media and it just makes me sick, So.
Well, you realize that if you don't want to be harmed. I mean, maybe it won't happen now, but let's just fast forward. I have written a book called Letters to the Cyborgs, where we have inventions of today and counting on the fact that of our lax ethics and our lack of responsibility and the idea, as I've said before, we have discarded God and replaced God with money. And that's always easy to do, but it's especially prevalent now.
Right.
We have families that are broken up. They've been moving around for years. They don't really have much connection with their children. Children betray their parents. Parents betray their children. When you see a father and a mother and they do a reverse mortgage on their home, they have nothing to give their kids. It's so selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe they have no choice because of the vicious cycle of, if you get sick in this country, you know, it's going to happen to you. Okay,
I have to
stop for now.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From E.T. contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio, at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically atomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern. No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
Enjoy your extra big-ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another extra big-ass fries?
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please come back when you can afford to make a purchase.
No.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids are starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener-supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning, how to do everything website, all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Hang on.
Okay, they're shooting.
Hang on.
Okay, we're here.
Go ahead and shoot me.
Damn! Trying to.
Shoot me. Get on the ground.
Stay down, stay down. Stay down. Stay down. Stay down.
Shoot me. You have to shoot me.
Damn it. Are they shooting him? Did they shoot him? You assholes. Oh my God! Hold still, hold still. Stay down.
Is
he dead? Don't get out. I'm EMT! Stop it.
Are you hit?
No, I'm EMT! Oh, hold on, don't do it. Hey, no shooting! Don't do anything. The door's shut. Where the hell is the boy? Down.
I can't see.
No! Shut up. Whoa! Shit.
I think they just
Keep
killed
down.
the boy.
Did they kill him?
None of us know the truth. The offense that was committed, it was committed against you. All of you. So if that makes you angry, do something about it. When Benjamin Franklin left Independence Hall just after the second drafting, he was approached by a woman on the street. The woman said, "Mr. Franklin, what manner of government have you bequeathed us?" And Franklin said, "A republic, madam. If you can keep it. The responsibility of a country is not in the hands of a privileged few. We are strong and we are free from tyranny as long as each one of us remembers his or her duty as a citizen. Whether it's to report a pothole at the top of your street or lies in a State of the Union address, speak out, ask those questions, demand that truth. Democracy is not a free ride, man. I'm here to tell you. But this is where we live. And if we do our job, this is where our children will live. God bless you.
Welcome to the last breaths of liberty in the United States and probably the world. Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, bringing you the news, the information, and as much truth as we can eke out.
Who are we? Where do we come from? Are you curious about the origins of the human race? Join me, Gavin McCall, and a variety of guests on Ancient Humans, where we decipher world events, explore scientific theories, personal stories, myths, mysteries, and lore about the history of the human race.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. The number to call in, 727-474-1086. If you have any questions or comments for Judyth Vary Baker, our very special guest tonight. Judyth?
Well, William, thank you for having me on, and I've been carrying on a lot here. One of the things that bothers me sometimes is that fact that we have, for example, it's very difficult to tell the difference between a unicorn, for example, and a fact or a fiction, article.
Right.
And what I'm trying to say is that as a scientist, there are a great number of things that, of course, I cannot accept that I hear. I realize that people want to know the truth. They're trying to find connections.
Right.
What with all of my might, I try to give you the full truth and vision as it was, and my interpretation. But at all times, I'm very careful to enunciate as best as I know how what I believe actually happened, who this man actually was, what we were actually engaged in. And I believe, as we are having our JFK assassination conference in November 18, 19, and 20 in Dallas, where we're going to have 35 speakers, including new witnesses, supporting the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill Kennedy and that we had essentially a coup d'etat. So when I say that with measured understanding of the responsibility I have, and I share with all of you, that our country was taken from us.
Oh, yeah. I've always felt that when Kennedy got it, that's when our government was taken over. And, a lot of the American people believe that now. A Gallup poll reported that 75% of Americans do not believe that Lee Oswald acted alone.
Well, the poor people had no choice. They did not say, do you think he was innocent? They only said, did he, when they do this, it's like, when did you stop beating your wife? Did he act alone or not? I mean, they didn't give anyone an opportunity to say he didn't act at all.
Right.
See how they spin it.
Well,
and the lack of honesty in the media, sometimes we can get through. It's wonderful sometimes to have a reporter see my evidence files.
Right.
And they used to say, I claim to be his girlfriend, or, the reputed girlfriend. But it's interesting that lately they just say, I'm his girlfriend. I have been doing this 16 years now. They can't stop it. There I have evidence, I have witnesses. Lee Oswald tried to save Kennedy's life. Jack Ruby said something marvelous, and it's often ignored. He said, I want you to know, he said this to the Warren Commission that came to visit him in jail. He begged to go to Washington. He said, when I'm going to say kill me, and he brought up the John Birch Society and things like that, but then he said, I want you to know that the act that I committed, that is killing Lee.
Right.
The act that I committed placed people in power because of what I did. Now that means, you see, Lee had the ability to expose it.
I know what that means.
Had to kill him. And Jack Ruby knew this. In fact, we knew Jack didn't want to kill Lee. We have record of several police saying that there were calls made, and it was Jack Ruby's voice. They recognized it, saying we're going to kill him if he's brought out. And of course, they trotted him out right on We have Will Fritz, who's he goes ahead. He's been interrogating. He's been telling everybody Lee was, killed Kennedy. We have all the proof we need.
Right.
As he's walking forward, he walks quickly forward just before Jack Ruby has plenty of room then to move in.
Right.
When the shot rings out, he doesn't turn around. He's the last one to turn his head. He knows what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are saying silly things like, "Oh, there was no blood there, therefore Lee was not shot." Lee was shot by a dum-dum bullet. Do you know what that is?
Dum-dum is like a hollow point, isn't it? And when it hits you, it expands out and.
What it does, it's basically it isn't balanced properly. It tumbles inside.
Ah.
And it does so much damage because it won't go straight and it bounces all over the place. And it didn't exit his body. That's why there wasn't any blood. Entrance wounds just don't make, unless you hit an artery or vein, right? It's not going to make any blood or anything like that exude from it. Just a little, minimal. So this is just simply not true. That he wasn't really shot. He was shot later and killed, and and he was no, he was definitely shot. And but the other is that they said he was unconscious. This is not true. You look at the photos, you'll see his fist is clenched.
Right.
His fist is clenched. That means he is still conscious. Finally, you look at the records and you look at the photos, you'll see that there's a tank of oxygen in the ambulance, but they never give it to him. I could go on and on about, and they say that, we treated him the same as we would anyone else. We didn't have prejudice.
Right.
Then if that's true, why, when he was wheeled into trauma room 1, they wheeled him out after a couple of minutes? Because that was Kennedy. That was the room where Kennedy died, so they moved him to another room. Meanwhile, he's hemorrhaging to death.
Right.
And they cut him open without any anesthesia.
No, somebody wanted him dead. And,
well, Linda Johnson called and wanted to know, from Dr. We have that on record, and we have the operator came forth. So anyway, I am anxious to answer any questions that people might have if they call in.
There you go.
Because often they don't get a chance or an opportunity to do that.
Exactly. So if you want to call in, number is 727-474-1086. Do you think that all of the...
Good answer. Ask questions. I'm anxious for you to do so.
Do you think that there will be a reopening of or a re-examination of the case?
Well, let's see. If the Fox wants to re-examine who killed the chickens and ate the eggs in the hen house, what do you think they're going to find? No, we are not. And here's the other part. They're so excellent now. Lee told me that there was actually a room that was filled with secretaries who were rewriting old materials, and putting them on old paper and all that with old typewriters.
Oh.
Yes, so God knows what they're doing now. Now they've been releasing, if this was not a conspiracy, why did they have to hold on to everything hoping we'd all be dead so many years? If this is a matter of national security, if one man was involved.
Right.
And if you go to my blogs, like Blogspot, if you go to Oswald Not Guilty, you'll see, and there are other places too that you can go, but you'll see that Lee Oswald he never even had the rifle. I never saw it. He, like any young man, he showed me all the stuff that he had because it was part of impressing me, and he didn't have a rifle. He would have shown it to me. He didn't even like rifles.
We have a caller. Let's go to our caller. Hello, caller.
Hello, how are you? How you doing, Wild Bill?
I'm very good, and how are you doing?
Doing great. I did have a question. We got a great show tonight. It was very interesting.
Go ahead with it.
Are you there?
Yeah.
First of all, I want to commend her for, speaking the truth all these years and, refusing to let our government keep her quiet. Mm-hmm. And continuing to speak her part of the story and her side of the story and trying to get people to know the truth. I really commend her on that. But my question was, a little while ago, she said something about trying, when she was making a comment about, don't eat in the same restaurant too many times, about people following her and tracking her and things like that. And I wondered, does she still feel like that's happening to her today and after so long? And,
well,
and if
that's a good
so,
question.
why?
Yeah. Go ahead, Judy.
I spent too many days at a restaurant when I first started speaking out in 2011, when the book Me and Lee finally came out in an acceptable form. It had been stolen from me once, and by good guys who thought they were doing me a favor, but they didn't. They had mixed it up with personal comments, and they took out things they didn't like. But I ended up with glass in my food and had to go to the emergency ward. I mean, that was an exciting experiment. Actually, it's been a mixed bag. First of all, when you get death threats and things, I mean, there's no way you can prove it. But I have a particular way I think I can help you to understand what we were up against. Martha Rose Crowe was my best friend. And in 2011, she also put up on her website, she had 105 blogs and, counter all kinds of blogs that were linked to each other, many links. And she put she put me and Lee up there, and she put also Judyth Vary Baker as my best friend. Immediately, we began to get death threats. At this time, James Henry Fetzer, Dr. Fetzer, decided to interview me. And right after he did so, he got the first death threat of his entire life. And he has said many controversial things. He was really impressed, even though the man said, it had nothing to do with her and all, and so on. The point is that he'd been talking about 9/11 plenty, and this person said it was about 9/11. Well, anyway, they tracked him down. At the same time, Martha, this is hard for me because I loved her. She was my best friend. We had known each other. She had worked at the U.S. Embassy in the Netherlands. She had received some reports that bothered her, and she tried to tell the embassy at that time that these reports should be looked into, and they fired her. It had to do with 9/11, it turned out. They fired her. So we had a lot. She was a vegetarian, and she was very spiritual, and I had been forced to flee to the Netherlands because of threats after the History Channel came out with my story, The Love Affair, episode 8 of The Men Who Killed Kennedy. So I was living there and under fake names and everything. And actually, I tried to come back to the United States, but it didn't work. Anyway, so I was at this time living in Hungary, and we were still very close, and we always were, when these threats occurred. And then she told me she drank something that didn't taste very good when she was at a party. And I said, I'm really worried about it. She said, I'm okay. And the next day, she went to the market. Now, that morning, she had written, both of us had received dreadful things to say. They're going to slice us up and kill us and things like that. And what can you do when you get things like that? Because any nut can say it,
Right.
And I've been told, wait a minute, Baker, if you're telling the truth, why aren't you dead? When you're dead, we'll believe you. No, that doesn't work either, because all these people who die, they say they killed themselves or it was an accident, including what was his name? The man who threw himself through a plate glass window and it cut only his jugular vein right. And he killed himself by throwing himself through a plate glass window.
Right.
Yeah, right. After he said they were going to kill him. Well, so I'm still here, so therefore I must not be telling the truth. They seem to discredit you if you have a high IQ. Apparently I'm so stupid. No, I've had to do many things. If I say I'm going to go to a different country, I may buy plane ticket, train ticket, a bus ticket, or anything, and I'll buy them all at the same time.
Do you feel safer? Do you feel safer living outside of the United States? Does it help you? Do you have a greater amount of confidence and freedom?
Yes, ma'am. I have a lot of friends who protect me. I'm able to use fake names. All my utilities and things are in other people's names. I get to stay in hotels of people that know and understand what I'm up against. The thing is I'm not going to change my story, and you're not going to find that. The only changes you'll find are real early on when they took my emails before I understood how to protect them by, making copies and sending copies to trusted people, by altering my emails and things like that. but you're not going to find anything. You look at interview after interview. I've had 80 interviews in the last 1.5 years, and you're not going to find any variation from what I've said from way back in 2003.
Yeah, there never has been, and that's what I complimented you on from the get-go. From the beginning. That
well, bless your heart.
I admire you for that, and I give you kudos for that, for sticking your ground and telling the truth. And your side of the story all these years with all that you've been through because of it.
I have never accepted any money, and all the royalties from the books go to conferences. I don't get the money for myself. This story has never been for sale. The other part of it is, here's Martha collapsed the next morning as she was shopping in an open market. They took her to the hospital before I could get there, before her family in America could fly there. They cremated her body without anybody's permission. They made a crime scene out of her bones and ashes because in the records there at the hospital, they said she had a heart attack, and they don't know how it happened, that they accidentally gave her a dose of epinephrine. It was about 100 times what it should have been, and it killed her.
Now,
I lost my friend.
If they want,
she said I was her best friend, and that she was dead a month after she had done that.
If they want you dead,
they can do it. But on the other hand, if you're pretty visible,
it's not.
It's better to make fun of me. I mean, I've got wanted for murder posters out there because I was working on that project, And History Channel had, for 5 years, I imagine it's still there, I haven't looked recently, under conspiracy theories, it says that I claim that I helped develop AIDS. And I've gotten threats from that.
Uh-huh.
And then David Lifton said I was friends with Osama bin Laden soon after 2000. Oh. I know. They'll say anything. Yeah, they'll say anything. But some people believe this, you see. And then you have to deal with them because not everybody is, they're going to believe some of these crazy things, So
I can't imagine. And especially I was just really surprised that you were still having to live that way to now in the current age. It was just surprising to me.
You're either very visible or you're very invisible. And I live in small places with trusted people who have known me since 2003.
Right.
So we're talking about 13.
So you're fortunate to have that.
I'm fortunate, but I've lost most contact with my family and children. First of all,
that's a shame.
Yeah, one of them hasn't spoken to me since. I really, really don't want to talk about it. That's okay. We don't have to. I'm sorry. It's not going to make any difference, So do you have any other questions?
Wow. Well, thank you very much for your time and for being on Bill Samsel's show. He has a really great show, and I listen to him every week. And appreciate you being here. It's very interesting.
Are you? How about you? Are you going to say what your name is?
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
My name's Tracy.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you. I don't care.
Well, you'd be surprised.
I'm probably already on a list now. Little did I know.
Yeah.
I have witnesses who have come forth and they say, "Oh, I saw it with Lee." I said, "Well, will you talk?" Well, no. After I die, my daughter will tell you and things like that.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And let's keep listening to the rest of your show. You guys have a good night.
Take care. God bless.
Thank you.
Yep.
There we go. All right. So, the level of corruption in our government just astounds me. The fact that these people can literally get away with murder.
There is a book out there by Richard Charnin, Charnin. He talks not only about the impossible trillions of degrees. Let's put it this way. These murders were not by accident or by,
Oh, no.
You can't have somebody shooting themselves twice in the head, for example, and call it suicide and so on.
Which they do. They do that. He shot himself twice in the head with right. But the Clinton family there, they've got a whole list of what do they call that? Clinton's list or something?
William, let me explain something to everybody out there. What we're really up against.
Right. Go
We
ahead.
have technology right now that is recording what you're saying, and they're not looking at it. They'll look at it if they want to.
Right.
And the trouble is, unlike in the past, here's the clue. When you saw those students, those university students who were protesting, and they were all handcuffed together, sitting on the ground there under the trees, and a policeman walks down and he's
sprays them with the
spray into every face there of those. They're locked together without a single. When we have that capacity to do this to people who are passive, who are unresisting, but it's worse. It's worse than that. The capacity we're talking about includes the fact that because of the surveillance system we have, we will not have the capacity. I promise you this is the problem. Any of your ringleaders or people like you, even people like me, what happens, it's easy to fabricate because you can get some DNA and then place it anywhere you want, like with drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You can create fake records. I've had a fake email that went around that says dreadful things about me and by someone, and all of it was fake, but there was not a thing I could do about it. We have the technology, unfortunately, to round up leaders before anybody can really do much.
Well, I'm sure.
And that's why, I mean, they will also sign petitions, and that creates lists for these people. We've got to figure a way to get around the technology that is making all of us really
well, it's robbing.
targets.
It's robbing us of our freedom.
I have this book called Letters to the Cyborgs. It's a wake-up call.
Right.
It's in science fiction. It looks like science fiction, but it's based on inventions we have today. I've tried to make it as pleasant as I could, but the fact of the matter is that unless we get a revival of high ethical standards and of belief in the essential goodness of human beings, and recognize who our enemy is us, in that if we do nothing, and if we try to do something, they will eliminate. They will make fun of you, or they'll deprecate you. They'll do things like that. But in the end, with the technology they've got and the records they can fake, we need to find a different way to get these people out of power. You can't do it by revolution. You have to use some other methods.
Well,
you have to use methods that will disarm them.
Right. But I think people all over the globe are starting to wake up. And you can see that with the Brexit, with Nigel Farage and his message.
Well, they thought they misinterpreted the people, and they believed that that was an easy matter. And yes, over in Europe things are in better. But then what did they do? They have flooded Europe with so many immigrants that it can bankrupt them.
Well, yes, and that's to break down the society. That's
exactly right.
Exactly what they're doing, and that's what they want to do in the United States as well, is to bring in all these foreign refugees, and they know.
Well, then we're supposed to look like we're we're homophobes, or we hate refugees, without the discrimination factor there is minimized. Like, we can't tell the difference between someone who is a potential aggressor and a little kid with a mother who's pregnant. I mean, for heaven's sakes,
Right, but there is no way to vet these people. I mean, their records, their histories, their medical records, everything is destroyed, lost, or.
Well, there are a few ways. You would be surprised, because now, please, I'm not trying to be facetious, but they once talked about dipping, bullets in pig's blood and all that kind of thing, and that's gross. But the fact of the matter is, there are many, many good Muslims, and it's just criminal the way, But I ask you this, why aren't the Muslims taking care of these people themselves? I'm talking about, reporting,
Saudi
they
Arabia.
have to understand. The Saudi Arabians we have different kinds of Muslims, everywhere. And the problem we have is, how can a woman accept $25 million from a government that won't let women drive, that executes homosexuals, that won't let women go out without permission from their husband? I have a friend from Iran, and I feel so sorry for her. She became a Christian, and her husband tortured her children and her. And he hid the passports. She got herself fake passports, and she got out of there. And because the passports were fake, they won't accept her.
Right.
Can you imagine? And yet she had no access because of husbands. And if she goes back, they'll kill her. What's going to happen to her? Why this poor woman has been waiting for 7 or 8 years now to try and have some country accept her. And yet we have big, robust men marching into these different countries, and they have no families with them or anything, and they're letting them in. And I'm a refugee. Well, I'd say that let's let the women and children in, and then little by little we'll see what we can do with the others. You see.
Most of these people that I'm seeing, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but they're all fighting age men.
There are a lot of them.
Right.
Now, I'm not against fighting age men. Actually, this woman, she's been here now 7 or 8 years. Actually, her teenage sons now could qualify like that, but they came as children. Anyway, we have problems, and part of it comes from the other sense. I lived in Norway in the 1980s, and they refused to. I remember we had the film Rocky, and 35% of it was missing because it was too violent. We see now that violence is acceptable everywhere. We see.
You name.
We now have police kicking people's head. They've seen this on TV. They've seen, in reality, if an actor smashes their hand through a panel of glass, that panel, is made of sugar candy.
Right.
And it looks and it break. I had a friend, because I had things stolen from me. I was actually put in a position of danger and escaped from it. And the man who had brought me back, because I wanted to get my diplomas, they sold many of my possessions, but they couldn't sell my diplomas. When they wouldn't let him in, he smashed his fist right through the window of the door so I could open it up and go upstairs and get my diplomas. Just like in the movies. Well, he was bleeding.
All over the place. Yeah.
That's right. You will bleed.
Oh, yeah.
And people will do violent things thinking it's acceptable. They see it so much now.
Right.
I'm telling you, we've lost our ethical standards. We've lost our compass.
Right.
And we've lost our families. We are divided. By dividing us, this individuality thing, you have to be an individual. And by doing so, you get eminently selfish.
Right. Well, it's part of the breaking up of the family unit, which is all part of the what is it? I'm just gone blank.
Well, you want to break everybody down to an isolated single denominator, just like in 1984. Winston had nobody.
Exactly.
And when you have nobody, and the other thing you do is make sure they have no homes. You get rid of the houses so they don't live in anything. They have nothing to fight for.
Right, and then you keep them hungry, or you make them hungry.
Well, you make them deprived, and there's a difference. You get used to being deprived so that some small luxury looks like, oh, your country's wonderful, you're getting some chocolate.
Well, you know, everybody I speak to, and I mean everybody that I speak to, is going down the tubes here in this country. They're financially,
I talked to a woman in the airport, and she was working a 40-hour week there, and then if she got off, she would work 30 more hours at a second job. And she said, I'm old now. I've got 5 more years before I can retire. She said, I remember when my husband and I, we worked each of us had one job. We could go to the movies.
Right. My father had one job, and he supported the entire family. And we went on vacations and went out on the weekend.
Well, you have to break those units down. And one of the ways you do it, of course, is to make sure that nobody can trust or believe in anything anymore. Right. You know what? It's almost, you better not say that you love Jesus Christ. Watch out. You know, you must be some
There's
fanatic.
something wrong with you, yeah. And that's another question that I have is, where are all the Christians? You know, they want to import all these refugees from the Middle East. 90% of them, more than 90% of them, 98% of them are Muslim. Where are the Christians? The Christians.
Well, they're getting heads cut off, my friend. And I'm telling you, that's where we should open our borders to those who are fleeing, like this poor woman who was tortured and her sons. And they'll execute her, they'll cut her head off, or they'll stone her to death if she comes back, because she was born Muslim.
Right. And
by the way, when I was trying to get political asylum, because my life was threatened so severely in 2007, because I tried to come back to the United States. It's a long story. It didn't work. Right. In 2007, my life was threatened in Hungary, and the Hungarian Secret Service came to me and told me I had to leave Hungary. I fled to Sweden. And can you imagine? They laughed at me. What? Here's this 65-year-old woman with her service dog, because I don't have very good vision. And you say you can't go to the United States because you're afraid. But we're sending you back to Hungary. We don't believe that you've had death threats, see?
Oh, man.
Well, 5 days later, I was still there because Hungary wouldn't take me back because they were genuine. Wow. So I ended up staying in Sweden 10.5 months. And my enemies, my critics say, she didn't get political asylum. Look, they turned her down. Well, they couldn't keep me forever, but they kept me long enough that I could make friends and make contacts. And now I am safe in Europe.
There you go. There you go, because things are falling apart here in the United States. So
we need gentleness and compassion, and our kids are being raised on violent video games.
Right.
They don't understand. How much compassion do you have if a child goes and soaps a window? They can get arrested now or even beat up by police. I mean, and where's the compassion if you can't make your house payment, and so they kick you out on the streets and the house is boarded up and you can't go inside? The mercy element is missing.
Well, there's not.
We get what we deserve because we're not exercising compassion and love for each other. I'm telling you right now, if somebody comes to me and I will give them my last dollar if I have to. I will do it because somebody has to exercise love. Love is the bottom line here.
50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, if you were poor, if you were hungry, if you needed a place to go, if you were homeless, whatever, you went to the church, right? And the church...
Well, they still do. The churches are still feeding more people than anybody else. But like in Florida, they're getting arrested for trying to feed the poor there. They're not allowed to.
Right, but what happens is that nowadays people expect charity from the government. They expect, all the things, all.
Well, William, I'll tell you something. The government was formed to keep us safe, and I have heard so often in America, oh dear, socialism is such a terrible thing. When I look at the people in Sweden, where I live a great deal of the time, and all through. You have Denmark and Sweden and Finland and Iceland. Iceland, by the way, put the bankers in jail who fooled around with them and refused to pay. Whereas everybody else said, oh, I'll pay. I'm going to pay back. I'm going to, and they didn't bail out. But we have all these people over there. They have a very high standard of living. They have free medical care. They have free college education. They have, again, they have a year to take care of their children, the babies that are born. They, I had a friend. He burned his hand. He couldn't work for. Oh gosh, his hand was badly burned. He couldn't work for 3 weeks, and then he had to get skin grafts and everything like that. I had a nosebleed. And had to go to a Swedish clinic, emergency ward. Right. I only had to wait 5 minutes. There was hardly anybody there because they basically don't need because they get such good care when they need it. So there are a lot of lies out there about, oh my gosh, the government. The government keeps the prices down because they have to pay for the medication. And when in Sweden, for example, they have at least 5 political parties. If a party has 5%, they can get on the ticket. So the people's voices are heard. In this country, we haven't added new representatives for, I think it's almost a century now, something like that.
Well, it's a big club.
Because if they did, they would lose power, you see.
Right.
We should have about 360 more representatives than we do. It would be huge, but we're the 3rd biggest country in the world, so think about that.
Yeah.
We need more representatives. Instead, if each representative has about 310,000 constituents, at the top 10 of those are going to be, they're going to be millionaires, and that's all they're listening to.
Well, over here in the United States, look at what we've put up with from these people since Kennedy.
And that's the key.
Choices
the key is the death of Kennedy, and that's why it must be investigated and it must be understood.
Exactly. Now, I've heard of somebody who's promised to do that. See, one of the presidential candidates.
That's exactly right.
We talked about that before, didn't we? Before the show.
Yes, and it's a fact. The reason he knew about Rafael Cruz, he didn't know a lot, but he's a very busy man, but he understood. By the way, Rafael Cruz, Ted Cruz's father, indeed was there, not on Canal Street, but at the Trade Mart. In the Rush film, you can look, he's not handing out any pamphlets. He is standing there. There was a real problem for Lee when he was on Canal Street because he had set up a fake altercation going on where Carlos Bernier and 2 of his friends, they were anti-Castro, they came up and stomped on his papers and hit him in the chest. Lee did nothing. And the idea, Lee got arrested. He wanted to get in the paper, so it proves he's pro-Castro. Why? If somebody's pro-Castro and they're getting picked on, do you think that anybody would think that he'd be bringing down a biological weapon into Cuba to kill him?
Right.
You see. All right, so there are reasons for what he did. But I really glossed over that quite a bit. There's more to it than that. Yeah. But the point is that a crowd gathered. I was there. In fact, it was August 9th, 1963. It was a Friday. I actually went down there and I picked up some pamphlets because he didn't want all of them ruined by Bernier. He would have had to print more. Gave them to an attorney called Dean Andrews. You can see him in the film JFK. John Candy looks just like him. And that man had the sweatiest hands I've ever touched. Yeah, he did. He sweat like a pig. It was so hot out there. Anyway, I handed him a lot of those pamphlets, their leaflets, Hands Off Cuba. And he handed those over to Carlos Quiroga, who was just like Rafael Cruz. When I'm trying to say, Quiroga got them back to Lee, and that's on record. And he visited Lee and carrying these, pamphlets. Well, these leaflets, he actually almost 5 inches tall. Wow. It was about half of them. So he could use them for the next leaflet distribution, handing them out. Yeah. So here, we did not want him to get hurt. I mean, this crowd gathered and they were going to beat him to a pulp. The police arrived just in time. So Lee had a problem. Now, Chauncey Holt is one of the witnesses who said he was there, also at the Trade Mart. And that's why I believe what Chauncey Holt had to say. He said he was one of the 3 tramps. We have Lois Gibson, who was a forensic expert in analyzing. He was also a master of disguise. And he claimed he was one of the 3 tramps. What I do know is that you can see him leaving the Trade Mart. He said he was there to watch Lee's back. And that's why I believe him, because that's why Rafael, is what Lee called him, my Rafael, Cruz was there. He was also from, just like Carlos Quiroga, he was had left Cuba. His parents were still there. He needed to prove himself. This man was there to protect Lee and not really to hand out, distribute anything. Right. And he doesn't. He's there to watch out and make sure no crowd gathers. He knows Spanish very well. He can hear what's going on. So Lee asked me, he said, I know you were worried the last time. He said, I want you to see my guardian angel. See, he called him Raphael,
Angel, right?
the angel, his archangel, his guardian angel.
Uh-huh.
So I really paid attention. I didn't pay very much attention to Charles Steele, the other person. He was an FBI informant. He claims that he was just accidentally picked out. Lee told him to wear a shirt and tie, and I only was looking to the right, looking at Raphael, and I didn't notice because I was interested in who was going to protect Lee, and that's the only one Lee mentioned.
Right.
Now, here's a hint, so you can tell who these people were. You'll see on that Lee's passport application and other places in the record, he describes himself as 5'11", even though he's only 5'9". You see, they made these separate records, fake records of themselves, so to speak. Now, guess what? Raphael Cruz did the same thing. Raphael is only 5'10", 1 inch taller than Lee. But on his passport, he says, his passport, actually his application for, this was selective service, it says that he's 6 feet tall.
Wow.
So this is what they did. And so he raised his by 2 inches, just like Lee did. Same thing, and that's what the CIA does. That doesn't mean there are 2 Raphaels out there or 2 Lee Oswalds.
Right.
There are crazy theories that, oh, look, he's that whole set of records, it must be a different person. No, this is how they protected themselves. So we have standing there, and I'm really paying attention to this man who is going to protect Lee. He will make sure that no crowd really gets involved. I go and talk to a few women that are standing there because I want to attract women there. I want them to stick around a while because where there are women, they're not going to have big fights going on either.
Yeah.
Then I have to leave. But on August 9th, on Canal Street, before this happened, when that big crowd gathered, I was seen, and I was fired that day by Riley. So that was a cover job we had.
Yeah.
And so I have August 9th that I was terminated. Well, and the same day that Lee was arrested.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, we were hired the same day to this cover company called Standard. It was a small subsidiary of Riley. Riley for years had been working, as Jerry Hemming was telling everybody. William B. Riley for years had working to help the CIA. They had their coffee interests, they wanted to make sure Central and South America and Cuba, they could get their coffee and their sugar and everything else for their tea and coffee products. And here with the revolution, with Castro, they could lose all of that. So they were very concerned.
Right.
And they were helping the CIA, and they gave Lee a cover job. The man who came just a year earlier from the USSR is working for the most anti-Castro, anti-communist company probably in the entire city of New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
And right across the street from that is the Federal Building. You look up from standing there right at Riley's, you look up, and right there in the corner is the office of Representative Edwin Willis. Who is he? He was the head of the House of Un-American Activities Committee, in charge of all the defectors. He knew the Lee Oswald's every motion. He said nothing until he was forced to on after the August 17th deal. So what I'm saying is that they knew he was there. They protected him. They didn't report him. Nada. So Lee Oswald was working for us. When he came back from the USSR, he didn't land in jail for saying, I'm going to give all those secrets, to the Russians.
Right.
They wanted him to give those secrets. It's a long story. If you come to the conference in Dallas, you're going to hear Gary Powers Jr. talk about how the U-2 was brought down.
Right.
And his father was pacing back and forth when he saw Lee on TV. He said, I know that man. Lee told me that he spoke with Gary Powers. He was brought in by the Russians in Moscow. Long story, Lee Oswald was a spy for us. He was able to come back with very little problem. It's a remarkable story, and Lee loved me. I loved him. I've got the truth for you.
It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So tell us, we're running out of time. It's not
right.
48. Tell us about a little bit about the conference, when it is, plug your book.
I'd be happy to.
How to get a hold of you and
we don't have very many tickets left because we've had, oh my goodness, we're trying to get the fire marshal to give us more tickets. We sold almost completely out. it's been a remarkable interest, resurgence, because we have brought in everybody. We have brought in new witnesses. We've brought in the truth, and we don't abide by anybody saying, "Gee, I wonder if he did it after all." We had one person who wanted to speak at our conference,
right.
And he said, "Well, I've got something to show that there was a shot fired from the Texas School Book Depository, from the third floor, so it couldn't have been Oswald." He said, like that. I said, "Well, what else do you believe?" It turned out he believes all the shots came from the back, you see. Even though you've got it.
No, when I look at that Zapruder film there
you go.
I see the way his head goes back when he gets hit. That looks to me like he's shot from the front.
Of course he was shot from the front. We have actually that was also an entry wound from the front. We're going to have Dr. Cyril Wecht there. He's the number one pathologist for all these kinds of things. He's been telling us for years where those shots came from. We're having Gordon Ferry. You don't know who Gordon Ferry is, but I'm telling you some of these names. So some of these people, he can tell you so much. Ola Damagard is coming. He won the Prague Peace Prize this year. We will have Edgar Tatro. We're going to have St. John Hunt, St. John Hunt's father.
Well, I think people are ready for some answers as far as the Kennedy assassination. How long ago was that? 40 years? 50 years ago?
It's been 53 years. We're also going to be holding the moment of silence. Oh, that's all free. Now, you can go to jfkconference.com. It can't get any simpler than that. And register. We have a full program on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday all the way. And then we're going to be holding the moment of silence, which is 53 seconds. Next year, it'll be 54 seconds. We're going to have people from Bethesda who were there carrying Kennedy's body. They're going to be at the grassy knoll, and they're going to tell you the truth about the Kennedy assassination. We're going to have brief, nobody has to pay a thing for that. We want people to know what's going on. We're going to give you a list of the top 18 books that you can trust, because you're not going to get them at the sixth floor museum.
No, you're not going to get them
No.
at the nah, I just went blank. The big bookstore.
Yeah, no, you won't. You're going to get
the big box bookstore.
That's right. But you will get the truth from us, and a lot of this will. The opportunities are there while we're still alive. While I'm still alive. I mean,
right.
I'm young and outliving some of these really dire enemies, and shame on them what they've done to our country. They killed Kennedy and they take over everything, and then they blame an innocent man. Lee Oswald tried to save Kennedy's life. Abraham Bolden was first black Secret Service agent. He was standing there in Chicago, part of the Secret Service, when the FBI called and said, "Stand down, Kennedy's not coming, because we have discovered a plot and we've arrested some men." All right, and this Mr. Valley is involved in all this, and the man who told us and tipped us off, his name is Lee. Now, who do you think that is? In my book, in 1999, I told people that Lee was actively trying to save Kennedy's life, and they practically laughed me off the stage. They don't do it anymore, because we come up with even more, lots more, about the real Lee Oswald. A brave man who gave his life trying to save Kennedy.
Right.
And that's how outrageous it sounds. It is the utter truth. And I will never deviate. You'll never hear anything but the truth from my lips. And sometimes there is one person out there who's claimed many things, and he said years ago that he knew that Lee Oswald's girlfriend was named Judy. Now, this came out years before I spoke out. But I won't endorse him because he said some things that are not true. So I will not endorse him, even though he said that.
Okay. Wow. Well, I tell you what, it has been an honor to have you on the program. And we've gotten into some really great stuff here during this interview. I'd like to have you back at some time. You want to do that?
I'd love to do so. And maybe it could be... Gosh, there's a lot going on, but it would be really nice if you could just pop in and here's maybe we could get a microphone for you, something you could hear one of these outstanding speakers. We have the best lineup that anybody's ever had. It's I mean, we're talking about 35 speakers. They only have like 40 minutes each, so they're going to really condense what they have to say, and they are the best there is. That's the best we have in the world. We're flying in these people from everywhere. And we got it's been wonderful. The donations that have come in, we're not losing money. We're going to be in the black. It's just wonderful. That means we've got something in it. We didn't have to get a single penny from the enemy.
It's about time. It's time for this.
It's been a change, and I haven't had threats so much. I would still get mockery. I don't care. I people who meet me and see the evidence files.
Yeah.
It's changed. They're not saying anymore alleged girlfriend. We just had, it was New York Times. They said I was Lee's girlfriend. They didn't say alleged, and so on. Because their reporters saw some of my evidence files, and that was that.
Uh-huh.
And I saved those things because it was going to be history. Because we thought we were going to kill Castro if we possibly could. We thought it would save us from an invasion of Cuba that could cause people to die, many people. We thought we were doing a good thing, and they stole it from us. God knows what they've done with this weaponized cancer.
Oh.
And I have been, if someone would put me in a lab today, I promise you, within 8 years, I could find a way to help people. Probably we would have a cure for cancer. That's how close we were in the 60s and 70s. That's where we ought to be today. Get it over with.
Right.
But it's such a lucrative business and makes so much money.
Yeah, you're right. Well,
shame on them.
And thank you again for coming on the program. What do we got? We got seconds before the music starts.
Okay, the books, Me and Lee, How I Came to Know, Love, and Lose Lee Harvey Oswald. You can get it from Trine Day, or you can get it from Amazon, for example. Then there's the book David Ferry, Mafia Pilot. You look at the film JFK, you'll see that. Then Letters to the Cyborgs, which is about the future, because I'm still a scientist, and I can tell you just about what's going to happen. It's not very pretty, but there is hope. You know why? Because people are basically good.
That's right. And we got to keep a positive attitude. Even if we lose this election, we got to stay together,
What a way to live. When you live for other people and you live for the truth, I sleep so well at night.
There you go. All right, Judyth Baker, thank you. God bless you.
And God bless all of you, too.
There you go. And everybody, come back next week. You wouldn't believe what I got for you next week. Take care. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Is your data safe? Do you have the necessary information to assist you in confidently living through just about any survival situation? Is survival and gardening, off-grid living, medical knowledge, or even natural or man-made EMPs on your list of personal concerns? Do you have your documents and your personal information in a safe place in your hands where you know where it is? Well, check out our preloaded EMP-proof thumb drive. Over 3 gigs of survival documents and how-tos, plus the USDA offline food preservation website, and much, much more, including a surprise bonus we just can't tell you about here. With plenty of room left over to store your most important documents. Imagine if a megavirus or a computer failure took out your bank, or all the banks for that matter. Are your banking records safe in your hands? So when they get things fixed and repaired, you can say, hey, look, this is what I had. You have it. I want it back. Is your personal data safe? family records, addresses, phone numbers? Well, squeeze on over to freedomslips.com. Yes, that's www.freedomslips.com. Click the banner on the homepage for the EMP-proof bullet drive to get the full scoop of everything that we offer. So, folks, keep your data safe for your peace of mind. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Enter into a world unseen.